Hey y'all, this video is going to talk to you today about density. So density is the relationship of mass to volume. When we talk about mass, we're talking about the measure of the amount of matter in a given object. The common units that you'll see used for mass are grams or kilograms. Grams are what our scales use. That is what our scales spit out at us when we put something on top of them. Another very common unit for mass is kilograms. So, in countries that use metric units much more than we do, human weight is measured in kilograms instead of pounds as we would do it here. Volume is the measure of how much space an object takes up. So, some of those common units that you'll see is centimeters cubed. Centimeters cubed is actually the metric unit for it. However, milliliters and liters are very commonly used, especially when talking about liquids. And so when we actually put this equation or put density into an equation, we write it out as density is equal to mass divided by volume. And that's going to be the equation that we use throughout the rest of the year. Now, from the density equation, we can actually solve for mass and volume, and you end up with two other equations. So you end up with mass is equal to density times volume, and then volume is equal to mass divided by density. And so we do that by taking our density equals mass divided by volume and solving for mass or solving for volume, depending on which one that we're looking for. Okay, so in order to get mass all by itself, we have to multiply both sides by volume. And so that's how you end up getting mass is equal to density times volume. And then in order to get volume by itself, we then take this equation here, this mass equals density times volume, and divide by density on both sides so that we end up with volume equals mass divided by density. So I'm not going to require you to memorize these equations. If you can work them out algebraically, you're not going to have to memorize them. If you found what I just said really hard to follow, then I highly suggest you try to memorize these equations, because these are how you're going to solve for different things when we work with density on in the future. All right, so let's work through a couple of questions. This one tells us that a block of aluminum occupies a volume of 15 milliliters and weighs 40.5 grams. And then it asks us, what is its density? So first thing we have to figure out is, what is this asking us to do? Well, it's asking us, what is its density? So we're looking for density. We know that D is a question mark for us because we don't know what it means yet. We see that a block of aluminum occupies a volume of 15 milliliters. So we know that volume, I'll represent it as V here, is 15 milliliters. And then it weighs 40.5 grams. So we know that the mass here is 40.5 grams. And then if you recall, our equation for this is D is equal to mass divided by volume. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. We're looking for D. So let's just fill in our numbers. We need M, which is 40.5. 40.5 grams. And then we need our volume here, which is 15 milliliters. And then we just type that into our calculator. So my calculator needs new batteries. I'm just using my phone calculator. Type that in, 40.5 divided by 15. And that gives us 2.7. This is 2.7 grams per milliliter. So our units tell us what we're measuring in and what we used. And so our density here is grams per milliliter because our weight was in grams and our volume was in milliliters there. Okay, so that's how you get density from a problem like this. So let's try one out where we're trying to determine the mass. So ethyl alcohol is poured into a graduated cylinder and measured at 200 milliliters. Using the density of ethyl alcohol at 0.789 grams per milliliter, determine the mass. Okay, so again, figure out what they're asking us. In this case, we're looking for mass. So M is equal to question mark because we don't know what it is. It first tells us that the volume here is 200 milliliters. So remember, it's poured into a graduated cylinder and measured at 200 milliliters, and milliliters is one of our volume measurements. So we know that volume is 200 milliliters. And then it tells us density of ethyl alcohol is 0.789 grams per milliliter. Okay, so if we recall from our previous slide, mass is equal to density times volume. So then again, we just fill in our numbers here. So our density is 0.789 grams per milliliter times our volume, which is 200 milliliters. So again, we just take that and type it into our calculator. So 0.789 times 200. And we get 157.8 grams. Okay, so our density is grams per milliliter. We multiply by milliliters, so those milliliters are actually going to end up canceling out. We're left with grams as our unit, which makes sense because we know mass is measured with grams. So another way to kind of check your math is think through those units, okay? And then we can see here that we did it right because we get grams at the end. So 157.8 grams. All right, so let's do one that says volume. So a lead cylinder has a mass of 540 grams and a density of 2.70 grams per milliliter. Calculate the volume of the lead cylinder. So again, the volume is what we're looking for. So V is a question mark because we don't know what it is. It says the lead cylinder has a mass of 540 grams. So we know that mass is equal to 540 grams. And then we know that the density is equal to 2.70 grams per milliliter. So then volume is equal to mass divided by density. And then we fill this information in. So mass is 540 grams. And then our density is 2.70 grams per milliliter. And then again, just type that into our calculator. So we get 540 divided by 2.70, and we get 200. 200 milliliters. So some of y'all might be asking, Miss Me, how in the world did these units work out? So let me kind of work through them just a little bit just so you can see what's going on here, okay? So our units, we end up with this G divided by G per milliliter. So if you remember, when we divide fractions, this is actually equal to the same thing as G times milliliters per gram, okay? So these grams are actually going to cancel out because G divided by G is going to be 1. And so then 1 times milliliters is just milliliters. So we're actually left with milliliters here left with milliliters here. That's good because we know milliliter is a measure of volume, and that's what we were looking for. Okay? All right, y'all. That's it.